Nah, man, this ain't on me. This is on you. You're the one that clicked the video. You're the one who saw that title, saw that thumbnail, and was like, yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and watch this. Today we are talking about 3 inches, because that is the measurement that I wanted to refer to as the magic touch here. And no, get your mind out of the gosh darn gutter here. This relates to hockey, I promise it does. Today we are talking about the Montreal Canadiens, and 2 guys in their system that happen to be small. Now, when it comes to small players, we've known the Canadiens have had a pretty good history with developing younger talent, drafting these guys, giving them opportunities. Sometimes they work out really well, like the Brendan Gallaghers of the world. You've got the Paul Byrons in the past. Even today, you've got Nick Suzuki, not a big player. A lot of other draft picks the Canadiens have had have been sub 6 feet players as well. The Montreal Canadiens are not afraid to go small, at least in relation to the rest of the NHL. I say that because I think a lot of y'all know this, but I am only 5'3" personally. Yeah, I'm Filipino, so I'm not tall. But when it comes to hockey players that are all taller than me, they happen to be small in comparison to the other hockey players that normally succeed in the NHL. And when it comes to 2 of the guys that are probably the most impactful Canadiens on the team right now, or not on the team, but in the organization, you've got top goal scorer Cole Caufield, who is right now listed at 5'7", and you also have a prospect taken in the 2nd round of last year's draft, Lane Hutson, who, to his credit, is listed right now at 5'10". Now, Hutson at the time of the draft last year was listed at 5'9". It's partially the reason why he even slipped to the 2nd round in the first place, because with the NTDP that season, he was really good already. It's just, hey, smaller players don't ever get taken where they should be. Now, when it comes to how everything comes about, how this 3 inches thing plays into it, I wanted to direct your attention to an episode of the Sick Podcast with Tony Marinaro. This is the episode from June 28th, 2023, and the quote we're looking at is a quote made by Kyle Woodliff, who once worked with the Nashville Predators organization. Now, the article I'm pulling this quote from, where the podcast quote is transcribed, it's on habsfanatic.com. The article will be linked in the description. This is what the former Nashville Predators scout said about Lane Hutson in this podcast. If Lane Hutson had been 2 inches taller and 20 pounds heavier at the draft, he would have been selected top 3. And that is a really bold claim. Because Lane Hutson, had he been 2 inches taller, let's just say 2-3 inches, because, I mean, he's 5'10 now, back in the draft he was 5'9. If he was 3 inches taller, he would have been 6 feet. And, you know, the meme that everybody likes to talk about when he's 6 feet versus when he's 5'11 and a half, and how the 6 feet guy is always treated a lot better because 6 feet is 6 feet. But this is a really real thing, because for Lane Hutson, especially as a defender, you don't normally ever see smaller D-men actually get taken higher up in draft boards. It happens all the time. Sometimes these guys don't even get drafted. And the ones that do, like the Lane Hutsons, usually go a bit further down than their actual potential indicates they should be. For example, the biggest one that comes to my mind is Quinn Hughes. And I mean, look, he was taken 7th overall in 2018. I feel like he should have been a top 5 talent. He got degraded in the draft a little bit because he's not a 6 feet defenseman. That's that. For Lane Hutson, you could talk about the profile he had in the NCAA, but you could also talk about his NTDP years, because we also brought this up in the scouting report video for Lane Hutson, but Lane literally had the best U18 defenseman point scoring season the entire program has ever seen. The only guy that outproduced Lane Hutson in terms of points on the NTDP was Cam York, and York was playing with Jack Hughes, Cole Caufield, Trevor Zegras, Alex Turcotte, Spencer Knight, etc. Lane Hutson also had a better points per game than York did. So Hutson was literally the best NTDP defenseman ever. Better than Quinn Hughes, better than Adam Fox, better than Noah Hannafin, better than all these other guys that were so good in their draft seasons and even draft prior seasons, that Hutson had a profile that if you said, okay, he bested Quinn Hughes, he bested Adam Fox, he was so good at creating offense, but he's only 5'9". If he was 5'11", 6 feet, 2-3 inches taller, then okay. That's a guy who, if he beats out all the records that these other players have, has no shot at slipping past the first round. He's probably a top 10 talent. He's probably a top 5 talent. He outproduced like crazy in terms of NHL E-scores, the production metrics of guys like Simon Nemec, like David Jiricek. There is no defenseman in the prior draft that had such a good showcase of point production than Lane Hutson did, because all these other guys in the CHL, the junior leagues, yeah, I get it, they're playing off against other kids. And sometimes they're playing off against 18, 19, 20-year-olds. But the NTDP is a different beast because the NTDP plays against college teams. Sure, they play their fair share of games against USHL competition, and the international games also count towards their record, but they play against men. And the NTDP is so focused on developing top talent that most of the guys that are studs on the NTDP, nowadays at least, have good chances of making the NHL one day. You can't say the same thing about the 20 teams in the OHL or however many other teams there are in the Dub and the Q. Not all these guys that are studs in that league become NHL players. NTDP, it's a little bit different. And so for Lane Hutson, if this guy was 6 feet tall and boasting up numbers that were better than Quinn Hughes, yeah, there's no doubt in my mind that he probably would have had a much higher projection at the draft. And the reason I wanted to talk about Cole Caufield as well is because if you had the same argument with Caufield, you get the same conclusion. We had made this conversation known a few years ago, back after he was drafted, that hey, if Caufield was just 5'10", with the same numbers that he had, literally the best goal scorer the NTDP has ever seen, he broke the Austin Matthews goal record set in that franchise, he would have been somewhere in the top 5. He wouldn't have slipped down to 15. If he was the size of my cell phone taller, and my cell phone's not 3 inches tall, it's about, what is that, 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5.5, 6 inches? Yeah, just about 6 inches tall. If Cole Caufield was 6'1", that's a top 3 talent right there. He's right there with Hughes and Kakko. Not because he is a franchise generational talent, but because you can't deny the guy that was over a goal a game and is literally the best goal scorer in the NTDP. The reason Jack Hughes said he had all the points that Jack Hughes did was because he was playing with Caufield. He said, yeah, if I wasn't playing with Cole, I wouldn't have half the assists I had. Maybe that's not the exact quote, but I'm paraphrasing here. Cole Caufield was so good, and he dropped so far from the top 5 all the way to 15th because he was only 5'7". If this guy was 3 inches taller, he would have been a top 3 pick. In my opinion, at least. Go over to Cole Caufield and his overall profile here. His projection in the 2019 draft. You have 9th overall by Elite Prospects, 9th overall by Bob McKenzie, 13th by McKean's, 12th by Future Considerations. It's so tough to look at his numbers and say that he should have been taken somewhere outside the top 10. But then you think about it, oh yeah, he's only 5'7", he's only 150 pounds, whatever he was at the draft. And it makes sense, right? If this guy was just the size of my cell phone taller, he would have been a lot higher. Same thing could be said about Lane Hutson. This is how 3 inches changes the entire argument. And a former scout in the NHL's Nashville Predator system went on to the Sick Podcast with Tony Marinaro and said just that. Yeah, if Hutson was 6 feet tall, he would have been a top 3 pick. He would have been taken over Nemec and Jiricek. He would have been the top defenseman. And so, while small players definitely do have their challenges, I can understand that for Lane Hutson, smaller defenders doing what they're doing in the NHL, you have to be able to compete with the big guys. And they're going to shove you out of the way, you're going to have to evade and find ways to avoid getting hit and all that stuff. It's a little easier if you're a small forward like Cole Caufield. 5'7" definitely is much smaller than 5'9" or 5'10" is though. But if you're a defenseman, it's a lot more difficult. So at the end of the day, Lane Hutson does have his challenges, but 3 inches, that's it. That's all that it takes to change the narrative around this guy. If he was 6 feet tall instead of being 5'10", if he's 6'1" instead of being 5'10", nobody's looking like this guy and thinking about size anymore. They're looking at the points, they're looking at the offensive ceiling, they're looking at the production, they're looking at the passing, they're looking at everything there. And people like to say, well, he's so small, he's not gonna do anything. Like, even if he gets all these points in college, once he plays in the NHL, he's got Ryan Reeves going off on him, like, it's going to be different. And I can understand where that point comes from. It's just, you got to be able to give talented guys their props, right? And I feel like that's an appropriate conversation to have here. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. How do you feel about Cole Caufield and Lane Hutson and how 3 inches could have changed everything? I hope you enjoyed this video, and bye.